Hey friends, it's Allison here, jumping in real quick before you get into all the juicy details of today's episode. Did you know there is just one more week left to our 200th episode giveaway where you have the chance to win a full ride scholarship to the Better Belly Blueprint? This is the way to heal your gut so that you can poop daily, ditch acid reflux, and balance your hormones even when nothing else has worked. Here's how you can enter. Leave a rating and review on the Better Belly podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify between now and May 29th. Take a screenshot of that rating and review, then go to betterbellytherapies.com/giveaway and fill out our 200th episode giveaway form. You will automatically receive an email with a code for $200 off the Better Belly Blueprint, which you're going to get as soon as you send in that form. And then a full scholarship winner is going to be announced on May 30th and messaged by email. If you win, you're going to win a full scholarship to the Better Belly Blueprint. And if you don't win, you can still get $200 off, which is 20% off of the Better Belly Blueprint if you join by May 31st at midnight. So go ahead and leave a rating and review. Get that giveaway form filled out at betterbellytherapies.com/giveaway, and you can finally end your constipation, acid reflux, and PMS for good. Did you know that according to research, 10 to 15% of pregnancies end in miscarriage? That means that for every 1 in 10 pregnancies, one ends up in miscarriage. It also, however, does not mean that 1 in 10 women will experience a miscarriage. As of now in the US, 80% of childbearing women have more than one child. So while 1 in 10 known pregnancies end in miscarriage, researchers also estimate that as many as 1 in 3 women have a miscarriage. With that in mind, I knew that the moment that I experienced my miscarriage this January, I didn't want to keep it a secret. And so on today's episode, I'm going to talk about what I've been doing in my health since my miscarriage and steps I've taken to shed any light I could find on the clue that my body was giving me about its health. Whether or not you've had a miscarriage or ever want to be pregnant, my goal on today's episode is to share with you about the power you can have in your health when your body breaks down in a way that you weren't expecting it to, and you don't know how to respond. Welcome to the Better Belly podcast, where we find freedom from food restrictions, we increase energy in our lives, and we begin to feel more healthy and vibrant than ever by finding the root causes of our health problems. My name is Allison Jordan. I'm a marathon runner, functional medicine health coach, certified craniosacral therapist, gut health nerd, lover of Jesus, and owner of Better Belly Therapies, a clinic based in Ann Arbor, Michigan that works with both virtual and local clients to help them achieve the best health of their life. I am here to walk with you on your journey to a better belly and a better life. We're going to go beyond popping a probiotic and just checking out our poop. In this show, we are going to go deep into gut transformation strategies that last for your entire life. If you are ready to feel your best, get ready to roll. You are in the right place. And just as a reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own health practitioner before you make any changes to your health. Okay, guys, so before we get started in this episode and the details of what I've been doing in my health since my miscarriage, I just wanted to make a note, maybe even more so for myself, to share that this is personal information, but it's information worth having. And I know not everybody is comfortable with talking about their health. And if you are listening to this podcast episode and you have something in your health that you wouldn't want to share on a podcast or aren't ready to share with other people, that's fine. But this is something, and one of my passions is knowing how important it is to connect with other people who have gone through things that are hard or that we don't have answers to, and we don't always know how to respond in the moment. And so this is part of my gift to you, and one of my passions of this podcast is being able to be real and being able to say There's so many people who out there who are sick, and we just have no idea. And so this is my story. This is what I've been doing with the skill set that I have. And I really hope that as you're listening, that you get a glimpse into some of the steps you can take, some of the things you can be thinking about, whether you're just on your own and doing stuff in your own home, or you want to partner with a health professional, whether it's a doctor or a nutritionist or someone like myself, that you have options. There's more things that can be done than just what conventional medicine will stand for, and so, or will offer you. So I'll start with actually want to share post miscarriage, which happened in January 2021 of this year. Well, I mean, it is this year. If you're listening in 2021, it's this year. What happened, and I remember as it was happening, not being sure how doctors would help me post everything. I remember my miscarriage wasn't simple and easy. I didn't complete the miscarriage right away. And so some of the conversations I was initially having with doctors was just like, okay, we want this thing to be complete and make sure the miscarriage is completed and thorough and all that jazz. And so I got done with the miscarriage, and that was a huge relief. It was definitely a burden on me of like, is this actually going to work? I just want this to be over. And if some of y'all, I'm not going to get too many details of miscarriage, but some miscarriages can be spontaneous and immediate, and some you realize that the baby or the pregnancy is not. I'm trying to remember. It's not called not valid, but it's not. The fetus is not alive or whatever the state is. And so, but then there's a delay of birthing that. And so I was in that delay point, which was its own difficulty. And that really delayed me being able to think about what's the next thing that's going to happen for me. What am I, why is my body doing this? It was just kind of in the moment of, I remember actually going and getting acupuncture at one point in that process just to try and stimulate. I was taking a couple supplements that can be helpful to stimulating birthing that actually can be used in birthing. I'm actually going to withhold that information because it's not meant to be used willy-nilly, and I use it actually under the guidance of my acupuncturist who specializes in using herbs to help with both fertility and getting pregnant, as well as who specializes in helping people heal from miscarriages and help their bodies grow stronger. And so I was partnering with her and taking some supplements and took acupuncture, and ended up using also some conventional medicine to help stimulate contractions. And that was my initial process. And I shared about that in an episode, which we'll link in the show notes, where I talk a little bit more in depth on what my whole miscarriage process was like, kind of the initial part of it, and how I saw the conventional care and alternative medicine partnering together, and the strengths and weaknesses I saw in both at the time. So we have a podcast episode on that. We'll link that in the show notes. But this is now everything after, and I've alluded to it in some of my other podcast episodes that I wanted to share with y'all what was happening or what I was about to learn, because I literally had no idea. In my mind, I was the healthiest I'd ever been, and I know miscarriages can be total flukes, and of course, I do my due diligence, and I ask the doctors, why do you think this happened? And they're like, we don't know. And they shrug, and that's fine. That's the truth. They don't know. They didn't have any answers for me. But that being said, me being myself said, but I'm sure there's clues hidden all over the place of why my body just didn't feel ready for this pregnancy. And maybe it was because it was my first pregnancy. That's fine. Sometimes, your body's figuring everything out. But I really didn't want to leave it at that. I wasn't super fond of the idea of a second miscarriage, and that might still happen, y'all. That has not been a bridge I've had to cross yet, but to do my due diligence on my side with my skill set, said, okay, let's start with information gathering. So the same thing I do with all of my clients, I start with information. I don't guess, I don't wait around, I don't play around, honestly. So the first thing I did is I actually reached out to my primary care physician or my family doctor, whatever terminology y'all use, and she knows me. I'd actually seen her 2 months prior when I got pregnant, when I knew I was pregnant, and talked to her. And so I told her I miscarried just in a short email, and she knows what I do. So I don't know if it was that for that reason, but I just sent her a list of markers of blood chemistry or blood labs that I was really interested in. I said, could you run these or could you make an order for me so I can get these? And she said yes. There were some markers. I'll just share this because I think it's fascinating and I do want you all to be aware. There were some markers she wasn't sure if insurance would cover. And I said, it was kind of annoying because this was a very annoyed point on my part where I said, do you have any idea? Can you see based off my insurance how much it might cost? She said no. So the hospital doesn't really understand. You'd have to call your insurance. And she's like, just so you know, depending on what your insurance does, this could be upward of $1,000. We just don't know. There was only 2 markers I asked for, and they actually were they were probably 2 of the most helpful markers I got out of that blood chemistry. So I'm really glad that I got them, but she's like, yeah, it could be upwards of $1,000 if this doesn't pan out right. So I remember being slightly annoyed of like, well, at least when I work with my clients, we tell them how much things will cost. But with insurance, it's just, there's so many layers of bureaucracy. You just don't always know what the bill's going to be. So I made sure that those 2 markers were going to be covered as much as I wanted them to be. And they were fully covered, which is great. But I got blood chemistry, and that was my first step. It was very simple because I've got all these labs at my disposal and that I could order for myself. And you guys have heard me talk about stool pathogen test and organic acids test. Actually, I haven't talked about that a ton, but heavy metal, hair tissue mineral analysis and food sensitivity tests, like multiple of those, and hormone tests. And I just you can get overwhelmed in how many, which ones to be picking. And I'm like, I'm not a fertility expert. I understand enough about how inflammation or hormonal imbalance or pathogens can impact your ability to either become pregnant or stay pregnant. But other than that, I'm just kind of like, let's do this the good old way. And so that is actually one of the reasons why I've created Blood Lab Bootcamp, which I talked about and is going to be available. It's actually available as of now, and I'm going to talk about it more at the end of today's episode. But it is a course that I've created where you can self-guided at your own pace, learn how to read your own blood chemistry markers, find what your doctor missed, and get the next steps. And part of my inspiration for actually creating this course was my own journey, which I've been documenting of what was the first thing I did after the miscarriage, what did I learn, how did it guide me, et cetera, et cetera. When I got my blood chemistry, I will let you know that the labs, according to what we call standard lab ranges, which is the lab range that says, if you're within this range, you're quote unquote normal. Normal's the word that doctors use. I don't think it's the best word. Average is a better word. If you want to know more about lab ranges, which I think you should, it's a part of health literacy and just understanding what is being said by your doctors and even how they're interpreting things that they're not telling you. You can check out our podcast episode titled, Why Your Doctor Says Your Labs Look Normal When You Don't Feel Normal. It's another piece that this course is built off of, the Blood Lab Bootcamp, where you learn how to read your own blood chemistry or blood labs. And that is how I interpreted my blood markers. When I got my labs, these blood labs from my doctor, the only marker that was high, according to their notes, was something called histamine. And you may have heard of histamine before, related to an antihistamine. You might take Claritin because you have sinus whatever congestion, or you're breaking out, so you take Benadryl because you got exposed to something you're allergic to. And so, but histamine doesn't necessarily only correlate to those 2 symptoms. Histamine can correlate to a whole host of other things, including diarrhea, nausea, acid reflux. You might be, those 3 on their own are just rampant in the population of people. And so if you are struggling with chronic nausea or diarrhea, or mixed state, like constipation to diarrhea or acid reflux, or especially if for some reason you have high estrogen, or you're suspicious you're estrogen dominant, histamine is likely playing a role in what's going on. But histamine was the only thing that showed up high on standard lab ranges. Then I ran it through my functional lab analysis, which has their smaller ranges. And the difference is that standard lab ranges are what the average person is, and according to all whoever they're sampling from, and average in America is typically not great. And functional is more based off of optimal health ranges. Based off of that, I got a much better idea of where I was at. My initial reaction, I'm actually looking at my results right now, was my initial reaction was some relief of like, okay, there's certain things that I wanted to see that were good. There were some things I was expecting to be a little off. My like creatinine, which can be a sign, was low, and that can be a sign of lack of physical activity. And I was like, yeah, I've been like pregnant and miserable, and like I was just really tired. Well, I was tired and hungry. Imagine that. And so that was low. And I was like, I definitely haven't been as physically active. So there were some things that were off. And most of the things that I'm looking at here that weren't my top concerns or my top aha moments, they were just mildly off. So my triglycerides were a little high, but just mildly, even for stand or functional ranges. Same with my LDL cholesterol. One of the things that was really interesting is my MCV, which is, you probably never heard of it, but just stick with me. MCV, it was high. And one of the things that can be correlated with is like a B12 or a folate deficiency. And I'm like, oh, folate and B12, those are important for pregnancy. So that was kind of like a little, note in my head. But what I really took away from it was two markers. The two markers I asked for that I've never seen a doctor run of their own free will, at least for like the average, even I guess all my clients and then doctors with me in my own health history have never run these markers. And one's called homocysteine and the other one's what I already mentioned, histamine. And so one was low and one was high. Homocysteine was low. And that can be a sign of what we call oxidative stress, which is, I don't know, a fancy word for inflammation. We'll stick with that explanation for now. And then, or a potential gene mutation where my body's processing homocysteine really fast. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I've actually been interested. There's a couple gene mutations that can impact homocysteine processing, and that's the CBS SNP and MTHFR. And just in general, gene mutations is something that I was interested in and hadn't really dived into as much as I wanted to yet. And so it was one of the reasons that I reached out to some of the people in my health community and said, how can I learn more about gene mutations? What's like a good introductory thing. And so one of my health steps from this blood chemistry test was reading the book Dirty Genes by Dr. Ben Lynch, which we will link in the show notes. But Dirty Genes is a phenomenal book. I felt like it was very easy to read, like very approachable. I imagine even for me, I actually felt challenged, and I remember taking notes and creating sort of like guides for me to really remember a lot of the gene mutations that he talks about and how you can help those genes like play nice is how I call it, or he says act clean, basically, of like, being a clean child walking into your house opposed to like one full of mud. And so you can clean up your genes is what he says, the language he uses, or I say, make them play nice. And so I was like, okay, homocysteine was low. And so I also had on my docket list, I was really interested from this blood chemistry test, could I get a really clear idea on good labs to run, something really worth my money, worth my time. And so with that homocysteine being low, I added onto my list of labs to consider a 23andMe test where I would get some gene mutation information and not just, you can get more than your like family lineage from 23andMe. And so added that to my list and wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet, but I was like, okay, let's keep looking. The other thing that was off and just totally surprised me was histamine. And histamine, it was my plasma form. I was just absurdly high. The standard lab range, this isn't functional, the standard lab range was 0 to 8 in the units that it has. And I was at 34. That's how I was like, oh, that's high, guys. I'm sure it can get higher, but I wasn't mildly off for that. And so options that I have in when you do functional lab analysis, you don't just say histamine's high, therefore I had recently been exposed to a pollen and it made me have a histamine response. There's a lot of things that can cause high histamine, and that's how functional medicine and functional health works differently as you're considering multiple options and you're looking for patterns. That's kind of it. And not that conventional doctors don't do that. They totally do it, by the way. But the number of things we keep in mind to look for patterns, the things that we're exposing our brains to as we're looking for things, and the markers we're keeping in mind that we want to know, have information on, is broader typically in functional health, because we're trying to find the root cause. I'm not just thinking like, oh, histamine, I'm sure it's pollen. The root cause could be way deeper. So options, which I wrote in my little notes because it helps me as I'm doing analysis. I do this with my clients and myself, and this is part of what I teach in my course, is just writing notes. What one marker might mean. So undermethylation, which has to do with actually connects to a potential gene problem or a nutrient deficiency that my liver's not methylating the way we want it to. Could be connected to depression, which I was like, okay, I just had a miscarriage. I'm not super happy, but I haven't been depressed. High estrogen or estrogen dominance, dysbiosis, which is bacteria that create histamine. And those were the big ones that I wrote down. There's a couple other options, but those were the ones that stuck out to me. I also know that histamine can be created by food sensitivities. And I actually didn't write that down, but that was one reason that I wrote down on my labs to consider a food sensitivity test I hadn't done yet. And so that ended up on there. So those were two markers were the most surprising to me and the biggest. My vitamin D was actually really low. And yeah, that's really not great for reproductive health. I was like, gosh, if this was all about me taking a vitamin D pill, that is sad. And I felt a little chagrined at that point of like, I was like, I guess I haven't been super great about taking vitamin D pills. And at the same time, vitamin D or any supplementation, it's not always just about, are you taking it? But is your body able to also absorb it? So that can be the case with calcium, with zinc, with B12. And I get into that with my blood course or blood lab boot camp. We talk about if having a low or high marker isn't always about, well, just supplement, especially if it's low. I think the doctor's like, well, just take more. And that can be the case. You definitely want to be consistent with something, not definitely, potentially want to be consistent with something you're low in, but you also can be low in iron for lots of reasons other than how much you're intaking it. And that's something I really jump into in my course and guide you. How can you, from your blood chemistry, discern, is this potentially just a intake problem, like supplements or food, or how much of this is an absorption problem, like I'm eating it, or I'm supplementing for it, but I'm just like, I'm probably just pooping and peeing it out, which we don't want happen. So vitamin D was low, and then my thyroid was kind of all over the place. And it's kind of complicated enough that I'm not sure if I really want to jump into it here, but it is something I go into in the blood chemistry course or my blood lab boot camp. I'm not doing great at calling it by its name, y'all. It's my first course, but I'm very excited about it. Blood lab boot camp. And so thyroid is another thing we actually really do jump into, and the nuances of things most doctors that I'm working with my clients on, this is not to slight doctors, but just in my experience of when we're not seeing results in our clients, we are not getting good thyroid marker evaluation, as in they're just missing information. And so doctors that I have seen blood labs from clients I've worked with are not running all the markers you need for thyroid. And you just don't know that if you are being told that. Like, and I remember when I was years before I was doing any of this work that I do now and going to the doctor and seeing a gynecologist and a gastroenterologist and PCP, and they're just like, they tell you everything looks normal and you're just like, really? And so all these ranges I'm looking at, like some are high, some are low, for my thyroid, were actually normal in standard range. And some of these are markers that, again, doctors don't even run when they run markers. So that was my initial blood chemistry. I was like, okay, thyroid's got something going on. Vitamin D, sure, I'll take that sucker. I can do that. Let's just go with that. But then homocysteine, histamine really were at me of like, is it oxidative stress? Is it genes not playing nice? If so, genes not playing nice has multiple layers. It's not, you can actually make a gene play nice. It's considered like turning on or off a gene. And that can do typically with inflammation. It can do with everything from blood sugar levels and estrogen levels and toxicity of the body, how well the liver is decongesting or how well the liver is detoxifying your body. If you have pathogens, high levels of cortisol from the pathogens, like all of that just makes your genes go crazy. And so diet, of course, sleep, stress levels, all of those will impact your gene function. But for me, I was like, okay, I like teach this stuff. So I consider myself decently good at what I'm doing, but all I can know is the data is telling me I'm missing something, and I'm fine with that. So I made my little list of labs that I was going to do. So blood chemistry was my first, and it's a great first lab because it's typically relatively low cost. For some of our clients, depending on their insurance, it might not be. And in that case, we actually have access to a lab where you can right now, as of the day that this is recording and releasing, we can get you all of the blood chemistry markers we recommend for $225 through working with us. And so that can be much cheaper for some people than when insurance doesn't cover it. And so that's an option. But honestly, for me, this blood chemistry was free. And that's why it's such a great first step for anybody in their health when something crazy and weird goes on. First off, your doctors are probably already running blood chemistry or blood labs, and then you just don't know it, or you don't know what to do with it. And it'd be like being handed a book and not being able to read it. It's just mind-boggling. And that's one reason I created this course is for whatever reason, I feel like people are, I don't know if it's doctors or ourselves, but I think that there's just this belief of like, well, I can't probably understand it. I'm not smart enough. And it's like, if you can learn to read, which that is the norm in America. It's not maybe 100%, but it is very close to 100%. Being able to read, like you can learn how to read blood chemistry and interpret it in a functional way and have those tools. And so that's what I am so excited about for having created this course. So moving on from blood chemistry and all its wonderful things that it has going on, the fact that it's free, maybe for the most part, and gives such good information. The next thing I did was the labs that don't come free, but I knew it also provide information. So what I did is I did something called a Zoomer test, and I actually did an in-depth, it's a blood chemistry, or it's a blood test, and really got an idea of all my antibody responses to wheat, corn, something called lectins, which I'm not going to get into that, but it's another aspect of food, and that I was suspicious I might be sensitive to, but had never gotten testing done. And then grains, like an assortment of grains. And I'll get to that in a sec on what the results were on that. Then I got something called a HTMA, or a hair tissue mineral analysis, where I looked at the mineral balance levels in my body and also any presence of heavy metals, which can impact everything from fatigue to hair problems, mood problems, fertility, ability to hold on to a child. Fun fact, heavy metals have been found in the umbilical cord of mothers after giving birth. And so there is strong signs that heavy metals pass from the mother to the child, which can deeply impact their development. That's physical development, mental development, speech stages, mood. And so I'm like, well, not only do I just not want heavy metals in myself, but I don't want to pass them on. And I don't want also heavy metals to inhibit me from having pregnancy. And it's just a test I hadn't done yet. And it's also like super affordable. So I was like, I'm doing this test. It was just on the table. It wasn't as connected to the blood chemistry. But I felt like it was just something that I needed to get done because I never had. And then I did our hormone test that we do called the Dutch test. And it both looks at adrenal gland health and sex hormone health. And I want to just get an idea. Like, I was probably six weeks out. I didn't check all these dates. Oh, I did it much quicker than that. Maybe 3 weeks out from my pregnancy, which might have, altered some of my hormone or pregnancy or some of my levels. But I really did want it to know as quick as possible what I could do so I could move forward. So I also did consider doing another pathogen test of like, is there something invisible? But I really felt like I didn't have enough symptoms other than my miscarriage to really garner the pathogen tests from everything I know about that. And I have run tests on a couple clients who really wanted pathogen tests done, even though I thought like you don't have enough symptoms to really suggest you are having that you have a pathogen, but they wanted to, and honestly, that is your prerogative. As far as I'm concerned, for our clients, like, because of the benefits of paying out of pocket, if you want, it's kind of like if you're at a restaurant, if you want to add cheese and you want to add on $1 for bacon and you want to add $1 for an egg and you just add stuff on, that's your prerogative. And so that's one of the benefits of doing things in a cash-based in health, is that you don't get told like, well, we're not going to do that. And a lot of times that's because doctors have their hands tied because insurance is guiding them on what is an appropriate reason to do certain tests or not, because they don't want just like gobs of dollars being spent for something they deem isn't relevant. And so, yes, you don't want to run tests for no reason. And I'm in that same camp, but if you do want to run it, like, gosh, you can, like, and so I did that little weigh thing, and I was like, all of my intuition is telling me that it's not worth it, and I don't want to just go hunting for something that's not there. So I chose to hold off on a pathogen stool test and just stuck with the Zoomer, which is my food sensitivity tests, my hair tissue mineral analysis, and my hormone test called the Dutch. Right. What did I find on them? So drum roll. First test that I got back was the Zoomer test. And that actually showed that I'm very sensitive to corn, rice, and why am I blanking on the last one? Corn, rice. There's another gluten-free. Was it quinoa? Something like that. There were 3 grains that are gluten-free that I am sensitive to. And other fun fact, a lot of grains have what we call cross-reactivity, where if you eat one, your body thinks it looks like something else. For example, rice actually can look like, or peaches and rice have molecular similarities to each other. So I'm staying away for peaches right now because my body really doesn't like rice, but I mean, like, it really doesn't like rice and corn, like really bad. And so total shocker to me. I definitely have some symptoms where, part of me is like, am I a perfectionist? And let me tell you guys, I fall, I don't know, victim sounds strong, but yeah, I guess victim to those same, like, maybe I'm making up my symptoms in my head when I'm like a little fatigued, and by little, I mean like maybe a lot, or, these things I'm like, is this just me? Am I just being a perfectionist and I want my body to feel better? Or maybe there's something else going on. So I hadn't really tackled any in-depth testing until this infertility, but let me tell you, I really take every clue the body gives me as a clue. Every moment of acid reflux or diarrhea or constipation, like, all of these things are clues, and that's part of how we get our clients having better results. Is we don't just say, "Oh, you're just being a perfectionist, and your body's just going to be the way it is the rest of its life, and so get used to it." At the same time, I was sort of falling victim to that, I admit, because when I got my Zoomer test back, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go off corn and rice." Because I was already off of gluten and dairy, but I did get the wheat test just to make sure that my markers actually said that I was staying sufficiently, like I wasn't getting contamination and my body wasn't flaring up due to some wheat exposure that I wasn't aware of. That test came out good for wheat, which was great. And then my corn and rice, which I was definitely eating multiple times a week, probably, I don't know, once a day, either one of them, if not twice or 3 times a day, those things were just really, really high. So I got off of them, and man, I felt way better. I feel way better. My skin is better. My energy levels have improved. My pain levels have definitely improved. I think I went through a detox because I ended up having headaches for like a month. And you can go through a food sensitivity, like a detox from foods you're sensitive to. Sometimes it's related to essentially like a, addiction you can develop. For some people, I forgot, there's a percentage that they found of people can have like an opiate receptor response to wheat and dairy. And I don't know if they've done it on corn and rice, but I figure, why not? And so sometimes people going off of these foods, you can feel way worse. And that can be related to either kind of like an addiction withdrawal problem, which you just have no idea until you do it, and it could be the fact that when you remove these inflammatory aggravators from your body goes, hey, weather's really nice. Let's do some spring cleaning. And then you just feel bad because you're detoxing all this stuff now that you're not exposing yourself to stuff your body hates. And so got rid of corn, got rid of rice, really felt better. That was its own emotional journey. And I'm actually going to get to that in a second because I want to deal with the hard facts first of my lab testing and how I got to where I got. And then just like what it was like to practically go through the changes that I deduced and got to from my tests. Okay. Next we have the Dutch test. As a reminder, this test is a combination of adrenal gland hormones like cortisol, a stress hormone, and also sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and a bunch of stuff. Honestly, before I'd seen this test and been trained in it, I didn't even know existed. Like, it's stuff that doctors don't look at. I don't know. I'm guessing, again, some doctors do. Maybe it's because they're functional doctors. Maybe some conventional doctors do look at these things. I just wasn't talking to them. And none of my clients have ever talked to these doctors before. So I had some classic stuff like post-pregnancy hormones. Two were really high. And it was like very much like, yeah, when you're pregnant, these just tend to be high. I'd also, fun fact, and I keep this in mind, I had recently within 2 weeks of doing this test, which I did at home. It's a urine sample you collect at home, super simple. But I had gotten the second COVID shot. So also I was talking with another friend who does what I do, and she's like, that might have not been the best idea. It might have messed with your results. I'm like, it's true, but I just wanted the test results. And if anything, I can always look back fondly as the test I got after a COVID shot. And so I get this test back, and the things that I took away from it that I felt like this really feels relevant and it matches up with some of my symptoms. And it matches up actually with my blood chemistry. So blood chemistry comes back in. We don't just look at one test and then just analyze a human being based off of one test. Like, I don't know. It's like looking at someone. This is a bad thing. It's just like knowing one aspect of somebody and then deciding everything about them. That's the best thing I can think of right now. And so I found something that correlated, which is on this test, it showed that I'm not methylating one of my estrogen hormones really well. And it shows that I'm actually methylating it slowly. And so that was like, okay, methylations now come up sort of 3 times. Homocysteine, which was low, which can be a methylation problem, usually methylating too fast, but it's different genes regulate these homocysteine versus this estrogen I was looking at. Histamine being high can be a methylation problem, this time being slow methylation. And then I was getting a slow methylation response from detoxing one of my estrogens. And I was like, okay. So that really helped me. And that actually gave me a specific clue of a supplement to take to help clean my liver more or less and support it in the meantime. And that's helped immensely. When you methylate this sucker slow that I'm looking at, you typically methylate several neurotransmitters slowly as well. And it can end up making your anxiety higher and just like jittery and on edge. And it's been really helpful. I've seen just some of my high feelings of tension improve. And then the book Dirty Genes really gave me an insight on the gene. It's called COMT gene, COMT, and it can be fast or it can be slow. And in the book, it just reiterated some things I was intuiting, but it was great. Talked about some diet changes to make and how often to eat with this gene and just some things that I was like, I always intuited it. And I just I think I cried reading the book, and I kept on telling my husband, like, this is so amazing. Because it makes you feel a little bit less alone, even with everything that I understand and know. Anytime you come across somebody else saying the same things, you feel a little bit less insane. And so, found out that this COMT gene, COMT methylation was behaving slowly and got some action steps from that. And then also, again, became increasingly more suspicious that maybe some of the things I was doing either in my lifestyle or some things I could do with healing my body through supplements or again, detoxification. Like I've been doing more saunas. We'll get to that in a moment. But all that could really help me. And so that was my big takeaway I was really happy to see that I had done a hormone test about a year prior, almost exactly a year prior to doing this test. And my progesterone was literally postmenopausal levels. It was in the pits. And that just showed that I had really high levels of inflammation. I never took any progesterone supplements or like not relevant. I'm not thinking of the words, guys, but the similar, hormone. I didn't take any progesterone to supplement it. All you have to do with progesterone is remove inflammation, and it pops itself back up. So when I did my test a year ago, which sounds short while ago, but it feels a long time, I found out I also had a parasite at the same time. So I just see that as like, oh, no parasite, progesterone pops back up, and we see that every time. And progesterone helps you sleep. It helps you feel calm, all of that. And progesterone was super happy looking, which made me happy. Adrenal gland health didn't surprise me, and I'm not going to go dive too deep into it. I didn't get too many action steps from it. But it was good for me to get my eyes on what was going on. And with all of that, I felt more connected to my body. I got an idea. Actually, another thing that this Dutch test gets into is how well your liver's detoxing through a marker called glutathione. And my glutathione was really low. So again, there's just more things that I was like, oh, okay, got it. And it was really helpful. And the biggest takeaway from the Dutch was really methylation. And so methylation was really on my mind. If you've never heard of it, that's okay, but maybe substitute the word detoxification. And then my hair tissue mineral analysis just showed some of my minerals were low. I imagine my minerals were probably way more out of balance in the past 12 plus months of my life. And so I think that they're on the mend, and I did have some heavy metals I was detoxing out of my body. So I did some subtle like supplementation of a supplement where you bind like these toxic elements and they don't re-enter your body, and you can just more safely excrete them literally through excrement. And then I also got an idea of like, I'm going to supplement with a couple minerals so that minerals can help with adrenal gland healing. It can help with thyroid functioning. And I don't mean iodine and selenium, though those two are included, but actually just like all these different minerals levels including things like calcium and sodium and magnesium, they can be hints as to how your body's doing. And so I was like, okay, I can tackle this mineral thing, and I'm going to just put there was no like huge aha moments of like, holy cats, my arsenic's really high. But, I was glad to find out my arsenic wasn't high at right now. All right, so those are my 3 tests that I did and my takeaways. And now it's kind of like the emotional and lifestyle repercussion to all this, because that's its own topic, right? Like step 1 in working with our clients is gathering information, which that's literally, wow, the last 40 minutes of this podcast or so about that. But then the next step is creating a plan, which I've kind of alluded to the plan and some of my takeaways. And then the last part is working the plan. And that's what just takes the time sometimes just because you can't implement everything all at once. And sometimes because once you do implement it, it just takes a while, like a cast. You put it on, but then you have to wear it for a while. And so my biggest change was definitely going grain-free. I remember the week it happened, we had a meal planned with some friends, or the week I got the results back. And interestingly enough, these friends are actually, the husband is diabetic and they eat a low carb diet. And I just messaged her and said, hey, I just want to let you know that if you have any grains on the menu for the 3, like my husband and myself and her, which her husband wouldn't be partaking in, I'm not going to be eating any grains anymore. And they were technically maybe one of the safest people I could have told, because they like live that stuff of eating grain free. But it really hurt. I really felt that new sense of I was the biggest problem person to feed. And I know that I have really improved over years of like being gluten-free and dairy-free. That doesn't bother me as much because it's just normal now. But initially it was definitely hard. And for a lot of our clients, it's hard. It's like telling the party person or telling whatever it is can you make sure that you get something from, if you're at a workplace and you have to tell your boss or whoever's coordinating, like, hey, can you order me a salad instead of a sandwich or whatever it is? And I think one of the things that has helped over time is just repeatedly seeing the kindness of the people I've worked with, of saying, yeah, we can do that. And also realizing not everyone's going to be kind and not everyone is comfortable, and also learning how to deal with those people, but just feeling like, okay, I know what to do if somebody does feel put off, or I know what to do if someone is overwhelmed by that request. And I have a bunch of skills for that. And those are things we teach and work with our clients on. And I also realize that I have a lot of supportive people, and I can focus even more so on the people who are supportive of my changes, whether they're eating those diets themselves or simply are like, yeah, we can totally accommodate for you. That just really helps. But admittedly, it was hard. I was like, crap, I have 2 more things. The corn and rice were big. I guess the rest of the grains also, but the corn and rice just felt big, bigger than everything else. And so some of the tactics I specifically took with the diet change was I only told a few friends at first, just kind of the ones that I felt were safest, my best empathizers, my biggest support champions. I talked with my husband about it, and I cried definitely when I talked to him, and just like letting that emotion flow through of like, honey, I'm sorry, I'm so broken. Or I don't know if I said anything quite like that, but like, just like all those emotions that come up. I focused on what I could eat. That is so important. Not focusing on what you can't eat anymore, but just being like, maybe handwriting a list of all the things I could eat. I didn't do that specifically, but I went through my pantry and visually was like, I can still eat nuts. I can still eat fruit. I can still eat peanut butter. I can still eat coconut. And, just went through all the stuff I could still eat. I can still eat all these smoothies that I like to make myself. And really, so again, focusing on what I could eat and celebrating that and making sure I had delicious stuff. Another big win was the week after I got the test results, buying new foods that I could eat, like almond flour crackers, which are delicious. I really love them. And that just calms the heart down, calms the emotions down of like, I can still eat delicious, fun foods. Anticipating and focusing on the anticipation of improvement in my health was phenomenal and really huge. My husband and I invested in something called Daily Harvest, where it's like these freeze-dried vegetarian meals that also have like grain-free options, like a lot of grain-free options. And that was huge, just to take off some of the pressure of meal change. And I realize not everyone can do that, but we decided together that this was worth our money, and it's been really helpful. And the last thing that really came to mind for me that kind of just helped me process and swallow this pill, because one of my biggest questions when I was telling friends that I'm got this test that says I'm sensitive to corn and rice, like really sensitive. And that it was actually affecting my blood-brain barrier. My blood-brain barrier is significantly damaged, according to some antibodies that I got also in that test. And I was like, it correlates, like not being able to think of words, or, being foggy headed, or having difficulty recalling names, like just like any of that, just not super fun. And while maybe many people deal with it, and let's say it's not like if you ever experience it, it's bad, but if that's the majority of your life experience, that's probably been a pet symptom I've just been keeping. And I think that's fine. Like sometimes you just don't know what you can get rid of, but also that's partly why I do what I do, because I'm kind of like a super against just keeping symptoms because you think you have to. And so that was really huge. But I was just really reminded and refreshed myself on, I'm a Christian. I really have sunken deep with this sort of sad but also important concept that the world is broken. It's not the way it's meant to be and the way it was meant to be built. And so I'm not living the life I'm designed to live. Like, I believe that God created us to be able to eat corn and rice and wheat, and that they're not these like evil foods that were like, you never knew I put poison on the planet. Like they're not poisonous inherently, but they are right now for whatever reason. And everybody has a million reasons why they're bad or harming us. And and one of them might be more right than the other, but the truth is, and what we're finding is they're harming lots of people, like lots of people, and it's causing autoimmune disorders and Hashimoto's and ulcerative colitis and being connected to Alzheimer's and just all sorts of crazy stuff that is not great. So, let alone infertility and or miscarriages. And so I'm like, it's just not worth it to me. I have no interest in developing any of these problems, or keeping myself on the path. And I definitely don't want to miscarry again. So yeah, they're gone and probably forever. And I just reminded myself the world's broken, and I don't get to be like, well, I don't want there to be poor people or the poverty or something. And so I'm just going to ignore the fact that it exists. It's just not helpful. And so, I took action and owned that, and that's now part of my life. And I feel a lot better. It's been late July, and I made all the change in June. I guess that's not very long, but I feel very acclimated to it. I know what I like to eat for breakfast, and I got all my new meals, and it's great. So I also really reduced my alcohol intake. I was just noticing that I was getting some odd symptoms with alcohol. I'm going to tell you. I don't want to tell you, but one of them was just like very odd smelling urine. And I was like, it kind of smells like ammonia, which is not great. It actually can mean that I'm getting high levels of ammonia from alcohol, which means my liver's not processing it super well. And I was like, it's gone, goodbye. And I really reduced alcohol. Like, and I didn't even drink it that much, but I don't drink a full serving. If I drink any at all, I just mooch off my husband and tell him he can have a second drink if he really wants one. Then I also was exercising less since January. And that has to do with the fact that I love exercise, and I do still exercise, but I felt like I really wanted to listen to my body, and there can be times where it's appropriate to be exercising less and be just super gentle with your body. My cortisol was weird enough that I also was like, okay, like I'm just going to be gentle. I'm going to do saunas, I'm going to do walks, I'm going to do yoga and short stints of cardio, but I'm not going to be running 10 miles, even though I really wanted to do actually a century with my husband, which is a 100-mile bike ride. Really wanted that, but I didn't do that. And so I've just been listening to my body, what it needs. I've, started sleeping a little bit more in the morning, or just getting a little bit more sleep. And I don't actually want that to be the goal for the rest of my life. I just feel like if I can spend 6 months focusing on preparing for a marathon or a triathlon, I can spend 6 months focusing on being gentle and resting. And that was actually really hard. And some of the hardest things that can happen with that, if you're used to exercising, is like feelings of guilt, or like these shame thoughts that are like, you're lazy, or you're doing this just because you're lazy, and this is actually who you really are. And that's the worst dang thing, like, of the whole, any change in exercise. If you exercise more, you can get those things of like, you can't lift enough weights, or you're so out of breath, or you're I don't know, how fast you run is really slow. And it's just like, we don't need those thoughts. It's not helping anybody, but we get them. And so that's actually an action point that I got out of all this was I had not read any Brené Brown books yet. And she's has one of the most listened to TED Talks, and she's a psychologist who studies shame and vulnerability. And she has all these books on shame and vulnerability and guilt and worthiness and feeling like you're enough. And I was like, great, I'm going to read one of her books. And actually, I'm on her second book. So I read the book, The Gifts of Imperfection, first, which was really short and to the point. And I basically used it like my morning reading with my quiet time, like my time where I'm developing my relationship with God. And I just would read a chapter. She had these like really like 8-page, 10-page chapters in the book. And it was just super aligning to my spirit and my mind of like, some of it was reminders, some of it was straight up like, had never thought of this way. But really helpful in continuing to develop my sense of worthiness outside of what I did, and giving up perfectionism and this constant need of like portraying a certain thing. Fun fact, despite exercising less, with being off of rice and corn, my weight has my energy levels have actually all improved. And not that I was super overweight, but like I've seen fluctuations in my weight that I'm like, that makes no sense. And it's just like, whatever, you just figure you're a body and you're going to love yourself no matter what. And you go on your merry way. But then the fact is that I've seen my body weight stabilize. And it's true. If you are eating foods that your body considers inflammatory, you're just not processing your energy super efficiently. And you're going to have usually extra hunger for one reason or another, which has to do with your microbiome. You're going to have decreased efficiency of using the fuel that you're giving your body, whether that's nutrients or the calories. And it's a deadly cycle. And so, I actually feel phenomenal, and I really look forward to when I get to exercise again. And I'm just listening to my body still. I don't have a specific date. I'm not. This is not like after X date, you have to kill yourself exercising. Maybe it's after I have my next child. I don't know. We're going to wait and find out. In the meantime, I'm definitely doing less exercise or like gentler exercise. So shorter frequency or gentler intensity, less duration, things like that. I started focusing on a couple supplements, which I'm not going to get into, but that does include a prenatal. It does include hydrochloric acid to help my stomach acid levels stay high enough so I could actually absorb key nutrients like B12 and zinc. And I get into that with my blood chemistry. There's a lot more other things you need to know if you want to actually absorb your supplements well. And I do hesitate against just throwing hydrochloric acid in your stomach because if you have certain pathogens, you can feel way worse on it. I read a bunch of books, which I've already mentioned some. The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, Dirty Genes by Dr. Ben Lynch. I read The Soul-Sourced Entrepreneur because I'm a business person and I felt so burned out in my business after miscarriage. And I think that's partly just like being burnt out from miscarriage and also like COVID and just like everything was like kind of hitting. And this is, like it just happens, guys. I imagine if you ever have felt burnt out in your job, whether that your job is being a mother or being an employee, or if you own a business, you get it. It happens. And so The Soul-Sourced Entrepreneur by Christine Kane was just phenomenal and super healing to my soul. I got a counselor because I was like, I need to process this thing. And I just knew it. Like, I was like, I could not get a counselor. No one's going to make me, but like, I'm probably going to be better off if I get a counselor. So I got a counselor for an undetermined amount of time, but it ended up being about 3 months. Ended up processing way more than just my miscarriage. It was super phenomenal. And I mean, I told my counselor so many times, I was just so grateful for her. And it was really good choice I was just glad I did it. And I took time off in February and April. I went to Florida where I have access to my parents had recently bought a home. And again, this is not something everyone can do. And we've never owned a home in Florida before, but now we do. But I took time off and I actually just like went down and I especially in February, which was right after my miscarriage, I just grieved. And it was really scary because I like to work. I like work being a distraction. I like being able to help people. And it was really hard to not work. And you guys probably had no idea I left because, I got all my podcasts done in advance. But I took some time off and rested and grieved. And that was another important thing that's just like unrelated to blood chemistry, and I guess sort of related. All of our blood marker, all of our chemistry in our body responds to our emotions and grief and things like that. And I did things like taking up some salt baths. I took, I do saunas a little bit more now, and those are just some gentle things I could do to help myself detox. The result is way more energy. I ended up, probably one of the most interesting things is I took a 3-day course for visceral manipulation, and I've taken these 3-day and 4-day courses before, and they just completely demolished me. And my husband knows, like, I'll come back in the evening from the course and just be like, good night, honey, and cannot do stuff. And so typically we plan to just leave me alone the days of those courses and not like plan a date night or going out with friends or whatever. And I had so much energy. I literally came home, I was like, or I would text him or call him on the way home and be like, what do you want to do? And he's like, are you feeling okay? I was like, I feel great. And there was just like night and day difference of like, wow, how different my energy levels are compared to all these changes. It was the first time I'd had a 3-day course since COVID hit. For sure. First day I had a 3-day course since COVID hit. And within 3 weeks of making these changes, it was 3 weeks later after I changed some estrogen stuff or some of my hormone related stuff. And it had been about 2 or 3 months since changing my diet stuff. And, I just totally different. Took that at the end of June and was amazing. Pain levels were down, like GI pain in general, which I didn't even realize I was having the amount that I was having, which I sound like my clients. I just sound like a human when I say that. I was like, wow, I was having a lot of just GI stuff I was having to muddle through, and can't believe I was putting up with that. My mood improved. That was amazing. I have a decreased white coating on my tongue, which has to do, if you have been following functional work at all for a while, you know that white coating on your tongue has to do with microbial imbalances, sometimes specifically even yeast overgrowth or acid, improper acid balance in the stomach. And so that has almost completely gone, which just really tells me my microbiome is way more balanced. I have less morning nasal congestion and evening post nasal drip, which is phenomenal. It just means that when I do go on a run, it's easier to breathe. And I mean, it wasn't that bad. It was pretty bad in college. That was the worst when it was. I remember that, and I thought it was allergies, and it was really just all my gut health problems starting to begin. My body temperature has increased, and by not freakishly, I'm not feverish. It was actually too low, which is a sign of hypothyroidism as well as some other stuff. But that is great. Like I take my body temperature every morning as part of how I track my cycle. And if you don't know about that, that's fine. We're not jumping into it now, but women's body temperature changes at different points in their cycle. And all my lows are higher, all my highs are higher, and that's amazing. That's really good. Also, having enough progesterone, healthy progesterone levels also increases your body temperature. And so it just means my progesterone's probably happier, my thyroid's probably happier, which is great. And so that was, again, that's subtle, I guess you could say. It's not like, I think my overall sense of feeling warm has actually improved. Maybe not enough that I'm like, it's like night and day, but it's definitely improved. And that's where I'm at right now. Like I've seen results. I've made some changes. I went through definitely emotional rigmarole of, I think there's always the emotional emotional roller coaster of the event, whether that's a car accident or an unexpected, I don't know, I'm thinking like stroke or something like that happens to your body, or like miscarriage or a surgery, just something that your like body didn't sign up for this, or or it's just something you're going to have to recover from. There's always all of that emotions there. And then there's the emotions tied to the changes you're asked to make. And then there's the emotions in between of not knowing what changes to make. And that is the health journey. Just last week, we released Hero, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, guys. But we, this month, had a podcast on the health is a hero's journey. And the fact, all the different stages of the hero's journey involves things like not knowing what the solution, or having a problem, not knowing what the solution is, missing information, the pain of the process of finding the solution, having somebody help you along the way. Like my acupuncturist, she helped me along the way. And my doctor, she played her part. And my mentor, or like different functional practitioners who I talk to, who are my friends who I talk to about my labs and what I went through, and just friends, period, who I talked to who said, yeah, we'd be happy to change what we were going to make so that you can have some food to eat. Or sure, we understand you won't be eating everything at the meal tonight, and you're going to stick to certain things. I had a family vacation, and we had to tell all of my husband's family that please, separate grains from the meal so I can, if there's meat and veggies, I can just eat that. And they were so kind, and they're really phenomenal. He's a very loving and accepting family, but that was scary. And I actually asked my husband to write, or to communicate that to them, or actually he offered. Dang it, guys, he offered. He's amazing. He offered, he's like, hey, would you like me to communicate this information? I was like, honestly, yes, I will take that. And there's plenty of people I'm having to personally tell about my diet change. I would love it if you would just communicate this, because we're only married 2 years and your family's super nice. And it would just be so helpful. And he did. And oh my gosh, it was so helpful. And that's honestly part of the healing of just knowing you're accepted, no matter what food you do and don't eat, no matter if you have a kid or not yet. Like all of my husband's family, all of his siblings, they have like 2 or more kids. And it's like, we don't have any kids yet. And it's just, there's no pressure of like, what, you don't have a kid yet, or all that jazz. And that's part of the healing. And that is at Better Belly Therapies. We want to do the testing and get the better information. We want to have a better plan so you can know what to do. But then working the plan, like, that's its whole process. And we want to be there and part of supporting you and talking with you and guiding you and giving coaching. And so that's the whole thing. But that being said, I do want to just make, again, a plug and realize yesterday and as of today, Blood Lab Bootcamp is available. If you are like, wow, Allison, I want to jump on board with this blood chemistry and being able to read my labs and find what my doctor missed and take back my health and get an idea of what my next steps are, then you can join this course and you can learn how to read your blood chemistry, not just today, but for tomorrow and next year and 5 years from now and 10 years from now, and have this information as a tool for the rest of your life. As a quick note, we only have slots for 25 participants. And as of the recording of this podcast episode, I don't know how many slots are taken. And so if you want to take this, it is open right now, and the registration will be open either until all the participation slots are taken, which is 25, or until September 8th, when registration will close and the course will not be available anymore. What you get with the course, though, is phenomenal. I mean, I already talked a little bit about things that we talk about, everything from showing you giving you all the functional lab ranges so you can differentiate not just standard and unhelpful lab ranges, but what a healthy range is for markers, what all those markers might mean, not just one thing, but the multiple things, how to look for patterns in your blood chemistry, what labs or other places you can look for information that you can garner from those patterns, some tips and ideas of what you can do to change in your health from that. My blood chemistry didn't have as much directly in it of what I could change, but there are plenty of things that you can have, even just straight from blood chemistry of some lifestyle changes or some supplements to change or whatever it is. And so just really phenomenal and really empowering information, so you don't feel crazy anymore of like, do I really feel that bad? Or is there really that much going on inside me? There really, really is. And symptoms aren't there for no reason, which I relearned again in my own life. So if you want to join this course, it is a 4-week course. And at the end, there is a bonus, which will not be a part of every time we release this course. It is a bonus as a thank you and as a celebration for having this be the first time we're launching it, and just to have the maximum and honestly fun amount of as much fun as we can have in this course, in which is a bonus group Zoom call with me at the end of the course, September 29th. And you can bring any questions you have from the course, any of your blood chemistry you want me to look over and talk about. If you have specific questions, that will be available at the end of that course. It's a bonus for joining us this round. And so if you want to be a part of this course, you want answers, if you have blood chemistry right now, you can use whatever blood chemistry you have. If you want new blood chemistry, I have information in there to guide you on what markers to get, so that you can ask your doctor or whoever and however you want to get them, order them through us. You can do that and get it and get the most recent blood labs if that's what you want to do. And so if you want to be a part of that, we have a link in the show notes. You can register now. The course starts September 1st and it will end September 29th. And then the best thing, if it doesn't get any better, is that once you've joined for this course, you have access to that information forever, unlimited access. So you can always go back to the course materials, the downloads, the videos, review them, refresh them, memorize them, whatever you want to do, however much fun you want to have every time you get new blood chemistry, going back and getting that information again, so that you are never alone in your health journey process. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. I haven't done an episode quite like it before, and I really hope that it blessed you and encouraged you in your journey. As a reminder, our course registration is open right now for Blood Lab Bootcamp, and I didn't mention it yet, but it is going to be for a price that it will never be again. It is a total steal. I want as many people as possible to be able to take this course, and so if you want to jump on this, jump on it now. It will never be this price again. Also, if you love this episode and you thought of somebody as you were listening, I encourage you, share this podcast episode with them. Or maybe you know somebody who you think would love the Blood Lab Bootcamp, or you want to take it together with somebody. I would love it if you would share it, and I could see all you and your friends and family in that course with me together. Well, if you love this episode, we have so much more coming down the line. Subscribe if you have not yet so that you can catch all of our upcoming goodies and information. Other ways that you can support us is by leaving a rating and review. It would mean so much. I have seen an increased number of ratings on our Apple iTunes, and I would love to see reviews and hear what is sticking out to you guys and what is impacting you. Other ways that you can stay in the conversation is by following us on Instagram at Better Belly Therapies. I've been hearing from more of you guys, and it is so fun to hear where you're coming from, what's sticking out to you, and where you are in your health journey. If you have any ideas on podcast episodes you want to come out, also feel free to shoot us a DM. I would love to hear what topics you're interested in. And remember, as always, miracles are immediate. They don't happen as fast as they want, and our health doesn't always go in a direction that we want right away. But healing takes time. We can expect that, we know that, and we can expect to see good things in the future. I hope to see you next week as we continue on our Better Belly healing journey.